to this whole divorce between ESPN and Major League Baseball. Okay,
Yeah.
so to give you guys some context, in 2021, ESPN and Major League Baseball, they agreed to a 7-year, $550 million deal. And in that contract, there's an opt out after the 2025 season. And ESPN has decided to opt out of the deal. And the deadline to opt out of that deal was March 1st. So after the 2025 season, ESPN and Major League Baseball will no longer be a thing. And after that happened, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, Rob Manfred, said it was beneficial to accept a smaller deal to remain on a shrinking platform. So he's taking shots at ESPN. And this is a pretty big deal because ESPN was literally paying Major League Baseball $550 million per year to have them on ESPN. Now, since they opted out, they don't have to pay that. And the whole thing is they wanted to lower the amount. So how did ESPN handle this situation with Major League Baseball, in your opinion?
Well, personally, for me, ESPN does not like baseball. That's just my personal opinion. They just never had that love for it. Like every time you watch Pardon the Interruption, you never really see that many baseball segments or blocks. It's all basketball, football. I mean, you throw in some other small sports in there, but in my opinion, though, I've been knowing ESPN and watching their shows, they haven't really just appreciated the game. And I feel like this was the time for them to do it with the contracts and the fact that what we just looked up, $550 million is a lot of money, but compared to the other networks that they're giving them, Fox gives them the most with over 700, almost 730 million.
Yeah, it's
And
729, and then
yeah,
Turner's also in
725.
there as well. So like, they're getting a lot of money anyways.
Exactly. And the way that ESPN handled it, I feel like is straight, bogus to me. And MLB just had enough of it. I just feel like they just like, you know what? You don't appreciate our sport. You're trying to cheap us out of certain, deals or whatever they want to like, the grade. They want to take out so many games. They took out baseball tonight after 2017. They're just not appreciating the sport, and I feel like it shows. And MLB finally stepped on their foot and said, "Forget it."
Yeah, I agree with you saying that ESPN doesn't like baseball because like every time you turn on like shows like Sports Center or First Take or some of these morning shows, name a time that they ever had an MLB segment.
Can't tell you. I mean, I watched it for almost 2 years. I always come to your house. You put ESPN on. No
No
sports
baseball.
at all. Like especially on PTI. Like I love PTI. It's a great segment. It's a great show. They don't do baseball that much. Barely see it.
And I also think it's kind of weird because let's be honest, the National Basketball Association, their product is god awful right now. And in my opinion, going back to this past postseason for Major League Baseball and the NBA playoffs, comparing those two playoffs, Major League Baseball's playoffs were way better.
1,000%.
I mean, it's just, and also the numbers are better. I know they play more games, but like still, Major League Baseball is pulling in more views, and the NBA since 2020, their views are tanking badly. Like I literally, if you guys haven't checked out that last NBA podcast I did, go check it out because I'm not gonna get into the depth of it right now.
He
But
had his
dude, yes, it was my head was about to explode. But enough of NBA because we're here to talk about baseball. Okay, so I think this is actually interesting because of what Manfred said. So the comments that Manfred said, he said, we don't want to be a part of a shrinking platform like ESPN. How do you assess the commissioner's comments there?
I feel like it goes back to like what you were saying how NBA is because ESPN is so heavy on basketball that because basketball is dropping, it makes ESPN look a little bad. And I know ESPN in general has had their issues with cutting employees and just not being the same anymore. I mean, I've bumped into former ESPN employees and they're saying it's just not the same and they're just not doing the same thing they used to. And it's just declining in general. And baseball is trying to be a growing sport. They don't want to put something like ESPN, not to totally diss them, but put their sport on their network when one, like I just mentioned, they're not helping them out at all. They're cutting their deals, they're cutting segments, they're not showing them frequently, along with just them wanting to increase. Well, ESPN is quite frankly not doing the same.
Right. And also just this television in general is pretty much changing. And while Major League Baseball was in this deal with ESPN, they got a deal with Apple TV for about 85 to 90 million dollars, and then they also had a deal with Roku TV for 10 million. So they've been showing some games on other streaming platforms, and Manfred also said that Major League Baseball is in conversations with other streaming platforms like Amazon and Netflix, who have bigger audiences than cable television right now. So with that, laying that out there, how does Major League Baseball and their future look with leaving ESPN after this season?
I think it's looking pretty good. And if you really follow sports, I know I have a couple of friends that just tell me that baseball is declining in viewership. And it's just not true. Like, they just don't know what they're talking about. Personal friend of mine here in Florida. We're not getting to that. I feel like you just said, and even with our school at Full Sail, they teach us that, TV and cable is just not is not the biggest platform to watch things. You go on streaming, and NFL has done it. You
Right.
see other sports, hockey is doing it. You see that is how you get viewers, because no one goes on their TV or their cable and says, "Hey, I want to watch so and so on channel whatever." They go to Disney Plus, they go on Netflix, they go on Roku, they go on Hulu, all these other platforms. And like I said earlier, the fact that baseball wants to increase, that is a better way to approach it, by finding platforms, specifically streaming platforms, to get there. And me personally, I don't. Rob Manfred has had his inconsistency or even bad takes with baseball trying to get there. I think, me personally, this is a really good take that Rob has into getting baseball increasing on viewership.
And also, I think the big thing to notice is that, like, I feel like, how the Dodgers have their own, like, network, essentially. The Cubs, they have their own network, and they've had their own network for a long time. And I think the future of baseball is that direction. I mean, with streaming just being so popular, I mean, there's no reason for none of these teams to have their own broadcast companies for every single game. And it's not like ESPN was showing a bunch of regular season games. I mean, they really weren't even showing it that much.
Right. That was one of the things that they cut down as well. They cut down the amount of games from, like, I think it was maybe 30 games, even more than that they cut down, because they just don't want to show them.
But that's bad business. If you're going to cut the games and then still pay 550 million, I mean, you're shorting your product anyways. So, like, it really doesn't even make any sense. And if you're going to have them for 550 million, you might as well take advantage of them by putting them in shows and getting as much content as you possibly can. Because from the future here on out, I mean, I know it's national sports, shows like Sports Center and things like that are always going to be able to talk about the biggest games, like the World Series, playoffs. But when you go back to this last season, I mean, even the NBA regular season was higher up in the rundown than a playoff series. I mean, it was absolutely absurd to me. Absurd.
It's just the way that the both sports are just using whatever advantage they can to their advantage. I mean, you see, like I said, baseball is using streaming stuff. Basketball is not doing as much to do it. They're keeping all-star games, letting the star players not play, and it's just not a great look. And I guess it goes back to what Manfred was saying, that we don't have want to be on a network that's not producing as much.
Oh, and I'm glad you brought the All-Star thing up, because I think Major League Baseball All-Star game is probably the only one that's really safe.
Absolutely. MLB's All-Star game is tradition. It's been NL and AL. Like, I know I mentioned, like, in baseball, it's not conference or Eastern or Western. It's national and American. So that just shows, like, a bigger tradition.
But that's the same. But that's the same thing. But I guess to kind of piggyback off that, because the tradition part is, like, it's not the conferences. Like, that's the tradition. But the problem with the other leagues, like the NBA, is that they've been going away from that. So they haven't been doing East versus West every single year. That's the tradition that's going away. But yes, you're right. Like, with the tradition with the NL and the AL, Even though we've had this conversation many times that are they two different leagues? No, like in my opinion, like they're just like the Eastern and Western Conference. They're conferences in a umbrella of a league. But yeah, that's the tradition that other leagues have gone away from. Now the NFL still does it, but it's not full contact. And with the MLB, it's not really a contact sport. So like you can kind of get away with a lot and you can still pitch hard. You just don't put your players out there for as much time.
Exactly. As long as they're there for a decent amount. Like you would see like last year, Paul Skeens probably threw, I think, only through 2 innings. You're there to see him for that one bit of time and then he's gone. You know, the starters, the actual starters, the hitters and the fielders, they're probably there for the first.
Well, I don't even think he played in 2 innings. Paul Skeens didn't even play 2 innings. I think he only threw four batters.
I think he did the one. Yeah, he only did the one because he faced Judge and then he left. Yeah. So he even left. I mean, before they were going a little deeper, but now again with injuries and stuff, and they didn't want to have him too deep. But before I used to watch at least two, but usually it's just the one. But with baseball's All-Star game, it just goes back to the beginning, and they're so traditional, and that's why baseball. I love them so much because they keep a tradition. They go back 100 plus years, and they keep that there while now adding newer technologies.
Talk to me, baby. Talk to me nice. I'm from another world, baby, yeah. Broadway paradise. They think I'm way too cold, cause I put my